Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Celtic Mindfulness podcast video-cast series. My name is Frank O'Connor.
I'm Carrie Radovich.
And we're a team. And this morning, we're coming back around to our series of podcasts and videocasts. And today we'd like to talk about communication in a personal level, which is one-on-one or, involved with just one other person. And from Carrie's perspective, from a work setting. Maybe you'd introduce that part of it, Carrie?
Sure. How you communicate at work with either people on your staff, people above you, people, in larger teams, kind of whatever sphere you're in, how to think about that.
Great. And from a personal level, just how do I communicate openly, honestly, comfortably, probably is a really good word, comfortably on a personal level. So I'll start there. For many years, that would have been a very difficult topic for me because I didn't know how to communicate. Well, let me clarify. I was communicating, but not effectively and not openly and not honestly. And most of that came from fear that I would be perceived wrongly, or fear that other people wouldn't accept me, I guess, is probably the more likely the truth. And a lot of that, for many of us, I know I'm not the only one to feel that way, but a lot of that for me came from probably early trauma, both at home and from, in a school perspective. So I'll open it there, and from a work perspective, how would you frame it, Carrie?
Well, I think that same thing applies at work. I think there are a couple of mistakes made. I think first, all people fear rejection, and so we tend to show up in a way that we feel minimizes that. And so people don't always bring their authentic selves to work. If you can imagine the difficulty finding your authentic voice and being willing to stand in it as a person in your personal life, imagine how much harder it is to then bring it into an environment that can feel more threatening even than your personal life. And so I see, I struggled with it myself when I was in corporate America. I see my clients struggle with how to bring their authentic self, how to be vulnerable in front of teams that they lead, how to share of themselves at a deep level. So some of the similar things that we experience on the personal level intensified by a structure that doesn't necessarily reward some of those things.
Yeah, very good. I like that because it's very similar. And I wanted to open up as well, I forgot at the very beginning, the reason we're doing this and who we are. On my end, I'm a certified meditation instructor, and I lead classes on meditation and mindfulness on a weekly basis. And then Carrie is...
I'm an executive coach, certified executive coach, and so I work with teams or individuals, and I'm hired by companies in order to do some of that work, and I use the lens of leadership, being better leaders.
So bringing it back then to why would mindfulness meditation have an impact here? And let me talk about that. When I'm not at ease, when my mind is thinking and swirling, and what some people call the monkey mind, lots of old ideas, beliefs, and concepts are operating. I'm operating from a pre-program that's actually in many ways not true. Not many ways, always. Really not the truth. But because that's what was programmed in, that's what my mind has accepted as truth, that's where I tend to come from. If I go to the meditative practice, the meditation, and get some time in stillness and silence, that begins to ease down, and I can find an ease and a comfort coming within myself, and immediately that's more easily translated into good communication. And because you and I are husband and wife, we deal with this on a regular basis. Right? This is something that we have, every married couple, but in our case, particularly the last 3 months, it's just been you and I here at home, working from home, and talk about an intimate relationship. If you really want to challenge it, lock yourself in your home for 3 months and see how things work out. I think we've been pretty good.
Well, I think what makes us good is even if we have moments of frustration, and it's inevitable in a married couple that you're going to bicker a little bit. I think both of us are really good at self-reflection and then coming back and communicating and saying, hey, I was wrong there, or I didn't mean it to come out that way, and the difference between my intention of what I meant to say and the impact of how it was received. And we're able to talk at that level to each other. And so that brings the ability to kind of clean up messes that are inevitable in human relationships.
Yeah, and a big part of that for me would be exactly what you said. Look, I do or say something wrong, and many times that's that old programming we're talking about. I'm reacting as opposed to acting, and the reacting is you say something or I hear it in a particular way that's not your intention whatsoever, but because of my old programming, I'm picking it up as something hurtful or offensive, whatever. And none of that actually may be true, but I'm left with that reaction. Now, because of the meditative practice, I'm getting better at catching that, seeing it. Oh, there it is. Is that truthful? Just asking that question, is that truthful? Helps a lot, because if I can see it, like, ooh, that's something that reminds me of a little 5-year-old boy. And a lot of times, the 5-year-old is reacting, is acting out. If I can see that, understand it, take a moment, take a deep breath usually, then I can come back to Carrie and say, I think I was wrong there, I'm sorry.
And vice versa. My old programming from childhood, my personality is quite built on getting things done, being efficient, making things happen. That's sort of my programming that came out of my childhood. And so sometimes I forget that efficiency is not appropriate with people, right? So, hey, can you do that quickly? Not explaining background or what have you. That effectiveness is what you need to think about with people. And I have to coach my clients. I mean, not surprisingly, I coach a lot of people who are action oriented like I am, who have a hard time slowing down, and treat people, kind of like they treat a task. And so really, I have to remind myself of that, which is why I think sometimes I'm a good coach for these people, because I make the same mistakes they've made.
Yeah, and very similar. I mean, you can see the similarity between personal communication and effective work communication. The chances are, if I'm not effective communicating on a personal one-on-one level, I'm probably going to have issues at work or in society. That's it. If I want to put a third category in there, it would be personal communication, social communication, which is in a social energy, and then work communication, which is professional, very straightforward. Let me come back, circle, and I want your take on this too, Carrie. If I circle back again on the personal aspect, the personal issue, if and when I find myself getting rattled internally, and I can get a moment to differentiate. Here's the mindfulness part, what I'm trying to say. Mindfulness allows me to be present in the moment, because if I'm present in the moment, everything is much more authentic. If this has taken over, it's almost like watching a movie. It's just running rampant, and I'm just reacting to what's going on in here. Mindfulness allows me to slow that down and stop it and say internally to myself, well, ask the question, where am I right now? Am I in authentic self or not? If I'm in authentic self, it's so much easier to say things like, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Here's how I'm perceiving that. And a good example of that would be, in our situation, when Carrie says something to me, is it a request or is it an order? Right? So my old thinking would be, oh gosh, somebody's ordering me around right now.
And my delivery could sound like an order because I'm being efficient, right? That's my old programming.
So there's both parts of a very simple situation that can happen on a daily basis very easily, just by taking that one moment of mindfulness and asking the question in here, is this an order or is it actually just a request? And I know that. And again, on Carrie, as you said, if I'm on the other side of that, how am I delivering? What's my delivery?
Absolutely. And it's funny you went back to slow down, because that's actually where I was going to go back to myself. I have to do it myself. I move fast. Lots of executives move fast. And so they tend to operate from, movement or action. And so I'm consistently asking them to take a breath, to slow down. And so those who are open to it, we talk about meditation, we talk about mindfulness, how to do that. And even if somebody isn't and they think that's airy fairy or whatever judgment they might have about it, I'll just ask them to take a deep breath, to slow down and center. And it is remarkable. And I made my own mistake with it actually the other day. I was completing with a client, and it was a tender moment. We did a lot of work together, and it was, I think, powerful work, and we were just saying our goodbyes. And I noticed I had another meeting starting in a few minutes, and I noticed that I hadn't thought about what I wanted to say, and I sort of moved into action. And the rest of the day, I had this vague sense that something wasn't right. And when I checked in with myself that evening, I went back and I knew exactly what it was, that I felt like I hadn't really come from the heart in my completion with her. So I sat down late at night and wrote a long email saying, wow, that was, not how I really wanted to complete our work together. I really want to tell you more from my heart than I was able to do in that moment. So the ability to slow down, to reflect, what is this thing bothering me? Getting in touch that it was, I hadn't really connected to my feelings on a topic that required that. And then cleaning that up and sending her a note. And she ended up sending me a note back saying she had a similar feeling, but on her end. So we both came to the same conclusion, but we both were taking our own responsibility for what wasn't happening.
I guess there's risk involved too.
Sure.
In, wow, what if I become vulnerable and tell the truth and it's not well received? And usually, in my case, I can only talk for myself, that's old stuff. That's because maybe as a kid, in either at home or at school, it wasn't well received. So that setup has already embedded and operating there. One of the things that can help with that is just the realization that whatever I do in life, there's risk involved. If I walk out the door, there's risk involved. And the more I become at ease with myself, the less of a risk that seems to be with other people. And as I've noticed that as I've gotten older, not as important to me today how others perceive me as it would have been 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where that seemed to be extremely important.
Well, and I think that gets to authenticity, right? It's like when you are coming from an authentic place, if people don't accept you for who you truly feel that you are, there's nothing you can do. And I think the pain in youth, or when I was younger, I'll speak for myself, is I was always trying to be something for somebody. It was really important. Like my authentic self was here, but my what do you want me to be lens, I think, was operating more, to be accepted, to be good, to, be considered an excellent employee. Like those things were, I think, more in the forefront than who I am. And I think that's the beauty of aging, is if you can get in touch with authenticity, the risk feels less great, less disempowering, or less scary. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. And in a few moments, we'll give you some strategies for both ends, personal and work, that you can employ almost, pretty much straight away. And before we get to that, I wanted to mention or bring up to, how do I tell my story in a way that feels authentic and real, and delivering it in a way that I'm not going, language is tough here, in a way that I'm not going to care, but that's the wrong way to say it, in a way that I'm not going to be scared. So the first part of that for me, and there's work involved here, was going back, facing the so-called demons, having a look at what happened to me as a child. And again, a lot of people are like, oh, look, that's over, that's done, don't want to. But look, I'm involved with working with other people all the time. And I promise you, I see this over and over and over again, without exception, that many adults, whether they be in their 20s, 30s, or in sometimes later 60s or 70s, with issues, we end up tracing them back to childhood, and particular childhood trauma, because it gets stuck. I give you an example. I spoke to somebody yesterday who had a situation as a 5-year-old and described to me in great detail, as if we were watching a movie, every single circumstance around that trauma, including the color of the wallpaper in the room. Now, if I asked that individual, what did he have for breakfast 2 days ago? He probably couldn't tell me, but he can tell me in exact detail something that happened 60 years ago, which means that event, traumatic, is still impacting his life today. As I realized, for me, many of my events were impacting today's Frank. And I'll stop at this. In order for that to begin to heal, I had to go back. I had to go back to 5-year-old Frank, because that's where the healing had to take place. 60-year-old Frank, 60-plus-year-old Frank, can help 5-year-old Frank by the adult that I am. But I got the forgiveness, the whatever needs to happen, acceptance, forgiveness, peace, needs to happen with the little guy. Now, I don't know how that translates into a workspace, Carrie.
Well, I can tell you. So, as a coach, your expertise is not about going back into childhood and helping your clients unpack that. That is the domain of a therapist. And as a coach, you're very clear with your clients about that. It's not to say if something comes up that you won't allow them to speak that. You just don't try and unpack that. That's out of your professional scope. That said, I often have clients who either are in therapy at the moment or have been in therapy, over their lives. And so it's not uncommon for those who have had therapy for us to talk about a triggering issue and for them to say, oh yeah, my therapist said, or I know that from my childhood. I actually have a couple of clients who have, are doing simultaneous coaching and therapy. And there have been times when, as a coach, we'll talk about how to, process or behave when something happens. And I've countless times had clients say, oh, that's so funny, my therapist said the same thing. So while it's not my job as a coach to go back and unpack all that, does come up because you bring who you are into your coaching relationship. So if I do see that a client is struggling with an issue and I feel like it's an unresolved childhood thing that's super, super deep, I'll often say, have you considered therapy? Are you in therapy? This is better handled in therapy. If I feel like it's something that really falls outside of my scope as an executive coach. Having done my own personal work and we've done our work together, I can spot it generally pretty well.
Great. Yeah, I figure that's because I know you can't really go to the therapy road. And again, I'm saying that was my own experience too. And for me, it did involve therapy, for sure. So let's regroup a little bit and then give some ideas for folks at home that you can begin to utilize, begin to use. So in regrouping that, communication from a personal level that feels okay, that feels authentic, that's going to feel right, involves open, honest communication. And many times that involves slowing this guy down. So I recommend, obviously meditation, mindful, or in my own experience, that has helped greatly. Being an authentic self, just feeling real. When people hear these terms all the time, authentic self, what does that mean? It means I feel real. I feel this is really Frank that's communicating. Being in that space is so important and so easing to the spirit. I feel much more at ease when I'm in that space as opposed to being stressed out. What are they thinking? Are they going to like me? What happens if I say this and it's perceived wrong? All of the above. So I would regroup it in that way.
I think those are similar, and I think the other piece I tell my clients are on the slowing down thing is as simple as taking a breath. I'll also say feel your body, feel your butt on the seat, like literally feel your butt on the seat, squeeze your toes, feel your feet on the floor as a way to ground if they're feeling emotional or ungrounded or maybe even disconnected. And the second thing is to bring your authentic self to work, to be yourself. You know how they have bring your kids to work day? I always tell my friends or my clients, bring yourself to work every day. Have it be an everyday event, even if it's scary, even if it feels vulnerable. And as you might imagine, I work with a lot of people who have tough exteriors. And when those clients have found the ability to kind of let that guard down and show their vulnerability, their true selves, they've had remarkable results that come out of how their team connects to them, how their team feels supported by them. So it's been really powerful.
Right, so that's Carrie Regroup and giving her tips for work, right? So, if say those three again, if you would, just succinctly.
Well, I actually don't know what the three were now, so it was something about connection
Checking
to body.
in with body and breath was one, right? Bring your authentic, bring your real self to work.
I don't know what the third one was.
Okay, so from the personal perspective, pretty much the same. Number one, be in mindfulness wherever possible. And that's exactly what Carrie talked about. Check in with your body. Breath. Go to breath work. And that's very simple. People are like, well, it's the breath work thing. It's as simple as this. Just simply be quiet. Bring all attention awareness to breathing. And just breathe slowly and authentically. That's it. And thirdly, exactly what Carrie said. Ask the question before communication begins. Am I being real? Can I just be authentic and worry less about what somebody else has to say? And in that vein, I wanted to remind everybody, every Monday and Saturday, Carrie and I lead Celtic Mindfulness Sound Healing Meditation. That's at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time. And every Wednesday and Thursday at 7 p.m., we also lead Celtic Mindfulness Sound Healing Meditation. It's open to everybody. Details are available on CelticMindfulness.com, Celtic Mindfulness on Facebook, and Frank O'Connor on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You'll get the information how to access, how to get in to the Zoom room. So 4 days a week. And this Friday, the 12th, at 5 o'clock and 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time, we're having an introduction to meditation, which will give 4 different types of meditation that anybody can utilize immediately. So if you can, join us for that as well. Details are available in the same place. Once again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Carrie. And we'll be back again next week with our weekly Celtic Mindfulness podcast and videocast series. In the meantime, have a great day, a great week, and be at peace. Namaste.